All right, let's jump into this week's Billboard 200 album chart.
Okay.
The fight for the top spot was really close.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting to me? Is like the words the report uses to describe it and how we're like talking about it right now, they call the #1 race a nail biter.
Oh, yeah. That's a very vivid way to put it, and the numbers really do paint that picture of a super close race.
Totally. And at the very top, we've got Kendrick Lamar's GNX back at #1.
Yeah.
The report uses the word reclaimed
Okay.
and also mentions that it's for its third non-consecutive week. That non-consecutive part, it tells you it wasn't like a simple hold on to the top spot.
Right. It shows that the chart is constantly moving and changing. An album can get to #1 and then other releases come in and take over.
Exactly.
So coming back to #1 is a pretty big deal.
Absolutely. And the numbers behind this comeback.
Yeah.
Variety, using data from Luminate,
Okay.
said GNX had 90,500 units, just a tiny bit more than the album at #2, which is Drake and PartyNextDoor's Home Sexy Tongs For You, with 90,000 units.
Okay.
I mean, that capitalization in the title definitely grabs your attention.
Oh, yeah. It definitely does. It's really striking. And that tiny difference in their unit counts. It just shows how close this race really was.
Yeah,
It really highlights how intense the competition is at the top of the charts.
totally.
Where even a small difference in streams or sales can completely change things.
Yeah, for sure. And in third place, we've got Tate McRae's So Close to What,
Right?
with a still very strong 87,000 units.
Wow.
So we're talking a really small gap separating these top 3 albums.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like you have multiple artists all performing really strongly at the same time. And
Yeah.
it suggests that they're all really connecting with audiences in a big way, even
Yeah.
if those audiences might have slightly different preferences.
Exactly. Now, about Drake and PartyNextDoor's album, Home Sexy Tongs For You, the report mentions that it had previously debuted at #1 back in February. That phrasing really points out the immediate impact it had when it was released.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And that #1 spot, it was a milestone.
Okay.
It was Drake's 14th time hitting the top,
Wow.
and PartyNextDoor's very first.
That's awesome. That initial #1, it's kind of expected from Drake at this point. He's a huge star.
Yeah.
But for PartyNextDoor, it's a real breakthrough moment.
For sure.
Getting to the top of the Billboard 200 is massive for any artist.
Huge. But as the report said, their reign at #1 was later cut short by Tate McRae. And McRae's debut was notable
Yeah.
because it was the biggest opening for a female artist this year.
That's incredible. It really speaks to her popularity right now and how much people were anticipating her music.
Totally. It just shows how quickly things can shift on the charts.
Yeah.
An album can have a really strong start, but staying at the very top requires that ongoing listener engagement. And McRae's biggest opening suggests a huge initial wave of interest.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's get back to Kendrick Lamar and the lasting success of GNX.
Okay.
The article says it continues to dominate streaming platforms with a massive 103 million streams this week.
Whoa, that's a huge number.
It really is. Those streaming numbers are a big indicator of how people are listening to music these days.
Totally.
To keep generating that many streams week after week shows a really strong connection with listeners.
Absolutely.
But it's not only about streaming.
Right.
GNX also had 16,500 units in physical and digital sales.
Okay.
And the report points to this as evidence of its staying power.
Interesting.
It seems like it's that combination of strong streaming and people actually buying the album
Yeah.
that's keeping it so competitive.
That's a really fascinating dynamic. While streaming is often the main way people consume music these days, having a lot of sales can point to a deeper level of commitment from fans. And it also suggests a wider reach across the different ways that people listen to music.
And Lamar's success isn't only on the album chart.
Right.
He's also making a big impact on the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart.
Yeah.
His track Luther with SZA is at #1.
Wow.
And then he's also got Not Like Us at #3 and TV Off at #4.
Okay.
That's an amazing presence at the top of the singles chart.
It really is. When an artist is that successful on both the album and singles charts at the same time, it usually means they're having a real cultural moment where their music is truly resonating with a large audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, let's look at a new entry in the top 10.
Okay.
Blackpink's Lisa's first full-length solo album, Alter Ego, which debuted at #7, with 45,500 units.
Right.
That's a solid start for a first solo album.
Definitely. It's a big deal to break into the top 10.
Totally.
Especially for someone who's also part of such a successful group.
For sure. And it's interesting, the report mentions her streaming numbers were more modest at 23 million, but Lisa was the week's top-selling artist with 28,000 units sold.
That's a pretty big contrast.
It is. It suggests a really dedicated fan base who are choosing to buy her music,
Yeah.
either physically or digitally. This kind of strong sales performance, even with those lower streaming numbers,
Right.
can sometimes indicate an artist who has strong international support.
That's a good point.
And Alter Ego has what the article calls an impressive lineup of collaborators.
Okay, who are we talking about?
It specifically mentions Future, Megan Thee Stallion, Tyla, Rosalia, Ray, and Doja Cat.
Wow, that is an impressive group of artists.
It really is.
Yeah,
Collaborations like that can definitely draw a lot of attention
for sure.
and bring in a wider range of listeners who are fans of the different featured artists.
Exactly.
Plus, the report reminds us about her recent performance with Ray and Doja Cat at the Academy Awards,
Oh, yeah.
which was a tribute to James Bond music. That kind of high-profile appearance can really boost an artist's visibility
Absolutely.
and potentially lead to more album sales.
For sure. That kind of connection between big public events like the Oscars and music releases can be super effective at raising awareness and driving those sales.
Totally. So wrapping it up, the article concludes that with such a competitive week, it's clear that the race for #1 is far from over. And, looking at these super close numbers
Yeah,
and the changes we've already seen, it's hard to disagree.
I agree. It really emphasizes that the Billboard 200 is always in motion.
Yeah.
It's influenced by all sorts of factors, from what's popular on streaming services to major cultural events.
Exactly. So as we finish up this look at the latest chart activity, it's clear that the fight for the top spot was a real battle,
Yeah.
with Kendrick Lamar just edging out Drake and PartyNextDoor and Tate McRae right there with them.
Rich.
And we saw a notable debut from Lisa with strong sales figures,
Yeah.
despite those more moderate streaming numbers.
Okay, so thinking about this week's chart activity, what do you think is the biggest factor driving these changes? Is it the power of streaming? Or is it dedicated fans actually buying music? Or maybe the impact of big collaborations and high-profile performances?
And taking a step back, how quickly can things change in the music world based on these weekly chart battles?
Yeah, that's a good question.
What could these close races and different paths to success mean for how artists approach their work and how we as listeners experience music in the future?
Right.
It's definitely something to think about.
For